My name is Tom Karlin, and I am the grandfather of Ruby Skelton, or as I like to say, my claim to fame is being Ruby's Opa. Of course, most grandparents would say that of their grandkids, and it is certainly true, because each one of our 11 grandchildren is that special and gives us a holy pride. Ruby sent me an email and asked me to help her with her class project for MLK Day by writing about the civil rights movement. She gave me these questions to address the issues of civil rights. 1. What was it like in the civil rights movement? 2. What was it like living through the civil rights movement? 3. Do you see any connections between what happened in the past and now? 4. Feel free to talk about and tell stories. And 5. Make it 5 minutes. Question 1 refers primarily to the period of the 1950s and 1960s when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the prophetic voice and primary leader. However, the civil rights movement in America started back in 1619 when the first slave ship, the White Line, arrived with slaves from Africa in Jamestown, Virginia, and before that, with the enslavement of Native Americans. So in reality, there has been an ongoing civil rights movement for over 400 years in our country. This movement has been needed wherever people have had their human dignity violated and whenever struggles for freedom have been undermined. The same is true of the 1950s and 60s. Landmark progress like the civil rights legislation signed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 brought hope, but also faced massive opposition through continued violation of the new laws. The courageous work for civil rights, along with the prophetic efforts to end the Vietnam War, grew into a combined nonviolent movement with leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and recently deceased U.S. Congress member John Lewis, with many others joining in solidarity. Question number 2. What was it like living through that movement? People were marginalized by structural inequality in our nation, especially people of color. In our quest for justice and liberation, Martin Luther King's challenge and call to embrace the nonviolence of Gandhi was, for me, a compelling and personal call. Martin Luther King traveled to India in the 1950s to study Gandhi's nonviolent movement that freed the Indian people from British colonialism. As Dr. King met at length with Gandhi's faithful followers in India, he found out where Gandhi discovered his principles of nonviolence, called ahimsa and satyagraha, or truth force, love force. Dr. King was so deeply moved when he learned that Gandhi, a Hindu, found his deepest inspiration from the teachings of Jesus, especially from the Sermon on the Mount. One of those teachings can be found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 43 through 45. You have heard it said, you must love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Question number 3. Do I see any connections between what happened in the past and now? Yes. I believe that what happens is continuously and intimately connected in spirit and truth. Only the time, place, and actors may be different. To stay within a 5-minute time frame, I will not tell any stories because I know that Ruby knows, and so does her mother Katie, that my stories are not always short. I would love to encourage you to look at a YouTube video of a current and prophetic follower of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. named Bishop William Barber. He is the leader of the Poor People's Campaign, and the title of the video is Masterful History Lesson, subtitled, It's Movement Time Again. In closing, I will share these short quotations. The first two are from Dr. Martin Luther King's mentor, Gandhi. I am prepared to die, but there is no cause for which I am prepared to kill. And non-cooperation with evil is as much a duty as cooperation with good. This final quote is from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. himself. My study of Gandhi convinced me that true pacifism is not non resistance to evil, but non violent resistance to evil. Between the two positions, there is a world of difference. Gandhi resisted evil with as much vigor and power as the violent resistor, but he resisted with love instead of hate. True pacifism is not unrealistic submission to evil power. It is rather a courageous confrontation of evil by the power of love.